Hi, my name is Imo and welcome back to my channel. This video is for you if you are facing communication differences in your relationship, specifically surrounding texting, as you can tell from the title of this video. Although surely the ideas in this video can be appropriated to apply to any type of communication differences of needs, styles in a relationship. You're smart, you can apply this to that. Feel free to use the ideas in this video and apply them to your specific situation, like maybe talking on the phone, or how frequently you communicate, or what the content of your communication looks like. If you have those kinds of differences in your relationship, you will want to keep watching because I'm going to share some ideas that could be very helpful for you. So I'm going to start off by defining communication. So what is communication? And I won't rack your brain. I'm going to make it very simple. For me, communication is connection. So some people will make a big deal about how they communicate with someone, like, oh, I don't like to text, or oh, I don't really like talking on the phone, or oh, I don't like to be in communication too much, or I want to be in communication a lot. And while, yes, we all have our preferences and our needs, I want to simply say that how we communicate, why we communicate, how often, the duration, the style, the mode, I think communication can just simply be whittled down to connection, how we like to connect with someone, just to make it very simple. And when we frame communication in terms of connecting, it really changes how we approach some of these things regarding our needs and our desires and our boundaries associated with communicating. So I have a story for you. Last summer, I was dating a guy and we had very different communication needs. Specifically when it came to texting, he was not a texter, barely at all. So for me, I like to check in with the guy that I'm dating. It doesn't mean that I want to text all day long, but I love to open up the day by sending a message. I like to close the day by sending a message. I like if there's a little bit of a back and forth throughout the day. How's it going? What are you up to? I hope your day's going well. If there's any things that we've talked about that are maybe hot button or pressing issues in the relationship, we can bring them up. If he knows that I have an appointment that I'm going to, or if I have a show that I'm going to, he asks me about that. So for me, I like to stay in touch. I think that is very important for my communication needs, and I'll share more about that later. So the guy that I was dating, he didn't like to text barely at all, like I mentioned. And he preferred most, I could even say all of the communication to be done in person. So we had a difficult trek with this, and I did express my needs that I do like to text, and we kind of compromised a little bit and we had a few phone conversations, but even those phone conversations were not the best ones, to be honest. So this was very difficult for me because if I didn't see him for a few days, sometimes we went a few days without seeing each other because we're working, we have engagements with other friends or different things going on in our lives. So we went a few days without seeing each other. And this was particularly hard for me because during those spaces of days where we weren't seeing each other, I felt very disconnected from him. And especially because this was a new relationship, I felt like we weren't able to carry on and build the relationship outside of seeing each other. And for me, because I believe that communication is connection, I didn't feel like we were able to really connect during those times we weren't seeing each other. And when we finally did see each other, it just felt a little bit jarring because you go these few days without really being in contact, and then suddenly you're in contact, and it feels like there's this in-between space. Something is missing in those block of days. Something is missing there. So how do we navigate this? How do we navigate a relationship where you have different communication needs and different communicating styles? Like what I brought up, where you have one partner who really loves to text, who loves to check in, who loves to be in communication, and then you have another partner who is so about texting. They maybe they have even hang-ups about texting and they would rather see you in person, or they would rather maybe talk on the phone. How do we deal with this in our relationships? So the first thing I will say is that in navigating these differences, it's very important to start first with who? With moi, with me, with you. So it's very important to look at yourself first. We very rarely look at ourselves first, and we look at the other person and say, like, why can't you do this? Or why aren't you satisfying this? Or you feel frustrated. So it's really important to look at yourself first and ask yourself and do a deep dive. You can journal, you can spend some time really thinking about it over the space of a few months, over the space of a few weeks, and, checking in with yourself and asking yourself, what are my communication needs? When it comes to communicating, when it comes to connecting with someone, what are my needs? What makes me tick? What makes me feel connected to someone, to my partner? And it's important to understand that your needs are different from your desires, although the two of those can get mixed up. And I would even say that in different points of your life, a desire might become a need and a need might become a desire. So needs, let's break this down. What would be a need? What is a need? And what would be a need when it comes to communication? So needs are what is essential, necessary, and significant to who you are and how you function, how you're wired. Kind of like what makes you tick. Basically, a need in this sense, a communication need, is a non-negotiable, and it could be a deal breaker. And it's attached to your conceptualization and vision of what a relationship means to you. We all have an idea in our minds of what a relationship means to us. Like, what's the purpose or what's the goal of us being in a relationship? What do we want to get out of a relationship? And your needs would be attached to this vision. And everyone has a different vision of what a relationship means to them and what they want to get out of it. Your needs will be very connected to your own specific, unique, idiosyncratic love language. It's how you feel loved. It's how you feel appreciated, valued, connected to someone. That is what I would call a need. So when you are doing a deep dive and looking at yourself, it's important to ask yourself, what are your needs when it comes to communication? How do you feel valued? How do you feel appreciated? What forms of communication make you feel particularly connected to your partner? So it's important to remember that your communication needs can be influenced by all kinds of things. They can be influenced by your upbringing, how you were raised and socialized, your attachment styles, any trauma that you've been through. For example, if you've experienced infidelity, you might have specific needs around communication and texting where your partner is in frequent contact with you throughout the day. Your communication needs can also be influenced, I guess, by the medium that you're using or the mode of communication, like a phone or like a virtual call or like seeing each other in person. And like I shared earlier, which I'm going to repeat again, your needs are also influenced by your understanding and vision and goals of what you want out of a relationship and what you wish for your relationship, which a lot of people might be totally unaware of. They might not even know what they want out of a relationship or what they desire the dynamic in their relationship to be. And this is why it can be very hard negotiating these aspects of a relationship, because maybe the other person hasn't really fully sat down and understood what they want out of a relationship, what a relationship is supposed to mean to them. So for me, because I come from a religious background, my visions of a relationship, I guess you could say, are more traditional. So I am someone who is looking for a long-term partner, a companion, a marriage partner. a teammate, a family member, someone that I can do everyday life with, and someone who's very close to me, someone who is family, someone who is family who I'm walking beside, where we are feeding into each other's lives, where we know what is going on in each other's lives, where we take a very vested interest in each other's lives, and we inspire each other and we speak into each other's lives. Did I mention someone to do everyday life with? So yeah, you can see how my communication needs might be influenced by my understandings of what I would want out of relationship. So because I want someone who's very close to me, someone to do everyday life with, I like to remain connected with my partner throughout the day. I've also experienced some trauma surrounding infidelity, so I think for me, I feel safe when I can hear from my partner. If my partner goes a couple days without talking to me or barely communicating with me, I feel like it almost like triggers a sense of unsafety for me. So on days that I don't see my partner, I like to remain connected. I like to send a couple texts back and forth. I like to update and share about how our day went. I would like to ask him about his day. I would like to be asked in return, to show that mutual interest. And I love when we can exchange care and love and affirmations for each other as well. So I want to quickly say here that communication needs, like I've shared, are a little different from desires, because needs are more like you have to have that thing. It's a necessity, it's a deal breaker. If you don't have that communication need fulfilled, you feel unsafe, you feel devalued, it's kind of intrinsically wired in you. Whereas I feel like a communication desire is more like, it would be really nice if they were able to X, Y, and Z, but it's not like an essential. It would just be more like maybe icing on top if they did that thing. So as I shared, the very first important thing you need to do is check in with yourself and figure out, what are my communication needs? That's number one. And it's really important to, while you are assessing and understanding what are your communication needs, it's really good if your partner does the same thing. And then you can come together and you can talk about it. And that is where the magic happens. That is where you start forming your dynamic and negotiating and renegotiating and thinking about, okay, well, what do you want and what do I want? And how can we create a loving and safe dynamic where our communication needs are both met? How do we meet each other halfway? You will prioritize those needs. You will want to make sure that the needs are addressed. Sometimes in relationships, we buy into this romantic, whimsical idea that a good relationship just happens. It's just good. Like there's nothing you did to achieve it. Because we're so compatible and we're just so linked that it's effortless. There's nothing that we needed to do to get to the height and the pinnacle of amazing communication and amazing love for each other. But I don't believe in that vision of relationships. I do believe that just like the relationship that you have with yourself that requires a lot of work and growing, reading books, doing a deep dive into who you are and what you like and what your values are, it's the same with a relationship with another person. It requires planning, work, assessing, putting in intention, putting in effort, putting in action. So in this space of you and your partner coming together to talk about your communication needs, it's really important for you to embody these practices. So you will need to really listen and try and understand each other to the best of your abilities, not assuming things, not judging, not saying, well, your communication need is stupid because blah, 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 blah. Not doing that. Just coming into the conversation with an open heart, with an open mind, understanding that your partner is different from you and respecting those differences. Secondly, you will have to make a commitment to try. And the key word here is try. The beautiful thing about a relationship that we don't always think about is how we are challenged to grow and evolve and become better people. I would even argue that even if you're in a relationship with someone who's not very compatible with you and isn't the most respectful person, which I hope that is someone that you would end the relationship with, they're not the most respectful person, you're still challenged in some ways to grow. Maybe you're challenged to become calmer, more patient, express your boundaries, express your needs, stand up, advocate for yourself. You're still challenged to grow. So I would say the beautiful thing about relationships is how we can grow and evolve. And I think communicating about your needs and coming to some type of consensus together is a beautiful, beautiful thing. It is something that might be challenging. It is something that might be hard, but don't forget that it's something that is beautiful as well. You are joining in intimacy. You're being intimate with each other. You are sharing your deepest needs. You are coming together, having heart to heart, talking about how you can meet each other halfway. And that's a very beautiful thing when two people decide how can they meld their needs and their desires and what they want and create a dynamic that works for them. Also, you are challenged to loosen up and open your heart and your mind and embrace ideas that are different. And I think that is ultimately good for the brain. And in the long run, I think it's good for your mental health when you let go of fixed, rigid ideas and you loosen up a bit and you look outside of yourself to try new things. So one thing I will share is that in that dating relationship that I had last year, I remember talking to him about my texting need, and I remember his response was like, oh, he had resistance, and he was like, oh, it's kind of stupid, like why do you need to text throughout the day? And although I didn't really take it seriously at that moment, I realized that in a way, like my needs were being undermined, and in a sense I wasn't really being respected because that was his response. There wasn't a sense of him trying to understand where I was coming from and why I needed a communication like that in the relationship. It wasn't a sense of trying to understand that about me. It was immediately dismissed. So for example, with this whole texting idea, someone you're in a relationship with might put up a wall and just say, I don't text. It's not something I do. I just don't text. And I would say there's a danger in being like that. I think it's really important to understand what walls do we have around doing or not doing a type of thing. So texting is just a form of communication. And like I shared earlier, communication is connection. Texting is not linked to who you are as a person in such a way that it's like, oh, I don't do. And also when you are embracing something that you don't typically do or don't like to do, you can also set boundaries around that thing. So for example, if I'm not someone who likes to text and I have a partner who does, I can still work something with them where perhaps I still text, but I have boundaries around texting. If I'm afraid of being on my phone all day, or if I have certain hang-ups around that form of communication, I can still decide what relationship I want to have with that form of communication and still meet my partner halfway. I would never want to make something a rigid no in my life if it's getting in the way of connecting more fully with a partner. In bringing these needs to your partner, it's so important to understand that this is a journey and patience is so important. This isn't something that you're going to figure out in a day. Rome was not built in a day. It's not going to be done overnight. You're going to have to understand it's a journey. There's going to have to be assessing and reassessing, negotiating and renegotiating, trial and error, trying out different things for a while, checking in with each other constantly, checking in with each other regularly. And don't be afraid to get outside help, whether that's a therapist, whether that's talking to a friend or a mediator, to negotiate a dynamic where both communication needs are upheld. There's nothing wrong at all in involving other people that you trust in your relationship. It's also important to make the process fun of coming together. Make it a fun thing. It doesn't have to be this dragged out, daunting, agitated thing that you do, make it fun, make it creative, make it exciting. Trying new things in your relationship can be fun only if you have the mindset for that. Only if you have the mindset where you say, okay, let's try new things. Let's make it sexy. Let's make it fun. Let's make it exciting. Communicating these needs to your partner will be a very important determining factor to understand if you align with each other and whether that relationship, quite frankly, needs to continue. Now, I wouldn't say you would need to end a relationship because one person texts and the other one doesn't. But if your partner is not willing to bend or try to meet your communication need, and you're not willing to do that for them for whatever reason, maybe there's a boundary that's being crossed, maybe you just don't have the energy or time or dedication, then I would really think about whether this is the right choice of partner for you, or whether you are ready to be with this person at this time of your life. I think when you've brought your needs to each other, then it's time to get creative and figure out what can be done. Here are some ideas I have. Okay, she's not much of a texter, but you're a texter. What can you do? What are some fun and creative and spicy things that you can do to have different communication needs met? Maybe she is someone who is more of an independent type, doesn't like to be on their phone all day. Maybe her vision of a relationship is such where, you know, some people have a vision of a relationship where it's not fully connected or fully integrated into their life. Maybe it's like compartmentalized it, that it's a certain area of their life, but it's not fully integrated into their life, either because that's how they see relationships, either because the relationship is too early and maybe that might change down the road. It could be that maybe she has an extremely busy schedule and it's really hard for her to stay in communication with you throughout the day. Maybe she is someone who has just not wrapped her head around this whole texting thing, and she is someone who forgets to text back, and it's just not natural and intrinsic to her to text. Maybe that's the relationship she has with her phone in general. So these are all things you would need to understand about each other and understand about your partner, and that's why having this kind of conversation where you discuss each other's needs is so important. Now, some ideas for negotiating a dynamic, it could be, remember, she is not much of a texter. Can she leave daily voice notes? Is that something she can do? Can she leave daily voice notes instead? Can she schedule her text? So yes, scheduling the text isn't as spicy, it's not as sexy, it's not as spontaneous, but it still meets that need, right? So she can make sure she sends you a text in the morning when she wakes up and she's getting ready for work. She could send you a midday text, and she could send you a good night text. And at least if there's different things that still happen in between these scheduled texts, that's fine. That would be more like the desires or the icing on top, but at least she is meeting those needs in connecting with you. Can you make your text exchanges spicy, interesting, and inspirational? Because for some people, texting is dull, drab, and boring, giving an update or a list of what's going on with your day. But what if you make your texts interesting? So you could lead with an interesting question, or you can share what you're thankful for, or you can talk about what is inspiring you for the day. You could even have a list of questions. There's so many sites online where they have lists of questions that you can ask your significant other, and you could go through those questions every day, like one question a day, just to make the text exchanges more interesting, flowing, and also a way to get to know your partner better. Maybe you could share a memory of something that you've done together that you've really enjoyed, or your favorite time that you've spent together. You could share your favorite thing that you like about each other. You could leave captions with cute pictures. You could leave pictures with cute captions, or videos, or a mixture of both. You could send each other songs that represent meaningful moments in your relationship. You could have daily phone calls or video calls instead of texting, or make your primary mode of communication video calls and phone calls and scatter in a few text messages. So there are so many things that you can do to bring your communication styles together and meet in the middle and find a dynamic that really works for you as a couple. The most important thing is that you have to be committed to working on this together. That's the most important thing, because if you're committed to working on this and trying different things, you will eventually find a dynamic that works for you, and in the process you will grow together and become more intimate. And until you get there, make sure to practice patience, celebrations of your successes, a lot of conversations and checking in with each other, and reworking ideas, staying away from perfection. It doesn't have to be perfect. You're not perfect, your partner isn't perfect, the dynamic that you have isn't going to be perfect, but as long as you are working on it together and you are trying to come up with something where you both feel heard, you both feel connected, you both feel loved, that is what's most important. So I will leave off by sharing with you what happened in that relationship. So obviously I'm not with that guy any longer, and I think I've shared in another video, but I had told him my needs with texting quite a few times, and there was just one day where the texting, we hadn't seen each other maybe for a couple days or what have you, and the texting was just so scant and just very like lack of effort putting in, and I just realized that I didn't think it was gonna work for me. So I told him that I don't think it is going to work, and it was really hard. I didn't want the friendship to end, the relationship to end, but ultimately, and this is so hard, ultimately you have to do what's right for you. There's a reason why you are wired the way you're wired. There's a reason why you have the needs that you do. And you need to be with a partner who can see that in you. They may not be of the same mind in terms of communication need, but at least they see it, they are trying to understand it, and they are working on something with you, and vice versa, so that you are both feeling loved. And if you are not finding that and you can't have that in your relationship, it is one where you would really need to consider if this is the right person for you. Well, thank you so much for watching. I am so interested in you. What are your communication styles? Have you had this happen where you've been in a relationship where you've had mismatched communication styles? How did you deal with it? Are you currently in a relationship like that? I would love to hear from you. Please say hello, please comment below, and thank you so much for your support and for watching. I will see you next time.